Okay, great.
Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Let me just see here. Okay, so um, Leo, I see you're here in attendance. So we start our meeting with the privilege of the floor. I don't know if you wish to address the board or not. If so, go down and raise your Zoom hand. It should be under reactions, the lower side of your screen, if you're not familiar with that, but I bet you probably are. Everyone seems to be most people are more familiar than I am with Zoom. But at any rate, so yeah, if you want to address the board, you can have a few minutes at the beginning of the meeting to do so. And again, just indicate that by raising your Zoom hand. Okay. All right. And all right, looks like you do. Great. So we'll go ahead and start with that. And then when you're done, I'll mute you, Leo. So why don't you go ahead and talk to us?
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
All right. Really, I just raised my hand because I want you to know I'm here and listening and express my appreciation for the work you guys are doing and the feedback and responses you've given me, Bill. And that's it for now. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for showing up. All right, so you are muted again. So, okay. The first item on the agenda is going to wind up impacting the agenda. So I'm going to start. There's a few interrelated pieces. And so I've decided that probably the smartest is for me just to sort of make a proposal and see if you guys are agreeable. And if not, then we can work on it. But the interacting pieces are the upcoming creation of a zoning commission for the town of Caroline and some membership being drawn from the planning board for that. The fact that we are working hard and diligently on this solar siting law and the battery energy siting law, and that just because of the order, the solar stuff is fairly ripe and the battery stuff is not been gone over much yet. That is trying to figuring out what to get done when. Here's my suggestion. And the fact that actually each of you has indicated separately to Mark that you are willing to serve on the zoning commission. And so here's my suggestion. So see what you guys think. And by the way, and thank you all for that. I propose that for the zoning commission, that Val and Barbara and Michelle be the ones that work on that. And part of the rationale is Val's long tenure on the planning board, so he gives a good perspective. And Barbara, you and Michelle, you are quite familiar with some of the stuff from having worked in the task force. I also think that in terms of, I think we won't get done with the battery stuff tonight. And in terms of continuing that, I think that Will and myself are probably the two, best suited for that work. And I propose, depending on how far we get tonight, that we strongly consider putting all the battery material into its own law. Separate out, have a solar law that we can basically be done with tonight, because again, I'm losing a chunk of the membership after tonight. And Will and I continue working on the battery stuff to get that into a similarly ripe stage. That allows us to push the solar stuff onto the town board, and they can then take it up as soon as they would like to. So for that, I would like to be able to finish the solar work tonight. After that, once a battery law is done, it is open. The town board has set by resolution that 3 members of the planning board serve in the zoning commission. It is quite possible for them, indeed there's some sentiment on the town board, to change that and put all of the planning board on the zoning commission. So my suggestion would be that once Will and I finish the battery work, that either she and I join the zoning commission, or that we get another member appointed to the planning board. So at least there would be 3 of us, because by that time Will and I will be very tired of each other and need a third voice. And that we continue with planning board work, over the summer while the zoning commission works. So that part is just up in the air. But that's my suggestion of the best way forward. And so if everyone's agreeable, then great. And if not, then let's just sort of, hash it out. But so that's my suggestion.
I think
I think it's a good idea. I talked about that with Mark, I guess, a few weeks ago, actually, the possibility, and it seems to make sense. If we do stay with an every other week or every third week meeting, especially if it's every other week, it's possible too that we just simply alternate between the planning board business and the zoning commission business once we all fold in together. I mean, it seems like that might work.
Okay, I mean, my guess is that there's going to be a great push to just get the zoning stuff done, and so if other work got in the way, that would be seen as getting in the way. But yeah.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I was going to say, your proposal sounds fine to me.
It sounds fine to me as well.
Okay, and Will, are you okay with not being in the zoning commission at its initiation, but perhaps joining it later on?
Yeah, I was, I'm surprised Mark said that I was willing. It was like a kind of reluctant, yeah, I could do it.
Well, I did not, and that was my other choice, was to go ahead and feel each of you out as to whether you were willing or eager. Though perhaps there's no eager, but okay, so that will probably work in that case. And you know, all of this is volunteer work, and so there's nothing that says that even if chosen for the zoning commission, you really have to serve. But I really do appreciate that you guys are indeed willing. It'll be an important task for the town of Caroline. And you know, I know there are many important things. Obviously, Will already has prodded me on age-friendly community stuff. I know the comp plan has, you know, made a number of points that things need to happen, like protecting land through critical environmental areas, trying to pursue easement options for the town to grant to help preserve kinds of land. You know, there's a lot of important work. And so my reluctance all along has been, I didn't want to derail all of that work. The countervailing argument that some members of the planning board is making is that, yeah, but the zoning is really important and key to everything. And so it might be an all hands on deck proposition. So I think that the way we can sort of thread the needle is to make sure that the solar and battery law is done. And it's going to be, I think, perhaps two separate laws, like I said. And then we'll reassess and decide whether the planning board, some of us should continue as a board, or whether we'll just join the zoning commission. So let's do that.
I want to just say that the third age-friendly workshop, which is in the second half of April, they want 10 minutes on that workshop about the age-friendly action item in the comprehensive plan. So at some point, I'd like to talk to you, Bill, about what the process was, because I only know what I did from my end. I don't know what it looked like from the other side.
Okay, sure. Let's have that chat sometime soon. When is that third workshop?
I think it's April 20th. I can
Okay.
send you the information if you like.
Okay. Well, I want to make sure that I wasn't like putting you on the gun. Like if I said it has to be next week, that wasn't like giving you 2 days notice or something. So, okay, let's
Nope.
just plan on that sometime next week. I'm not sure I have a lot to tell you. We might have to get in touch with Charles too, because again, he drafted most of the language around that, but then, and Val can chip in too, because he was there for all the discussions. Okay. So with that, what I'm going to say in terms of the agenda, which talked about doing some of the solar stuff, moving on to battery, then moving on to decommissioning, because I just went through the law and order, is that we actually take decommissioning and move it up in the agenda so that we would first deal with all the sort of solar provisions, then look at the decommissioning section, ignoring anything specific to batteries, and then whatever time remains in the meeting, get started on the battery stuff. So that will be that. And so I will share my screen to pull things up. We'll be going through is everything that I mentioned in the email earlier today in terms of little odds and ends of things that have been pulled in to make sure we consider. And Leo, part of that is the lighting stuff that you poked on. And so we have new lighting wording. I also, at the very last minute, literally at 5:10, added a small section on transferring a permit or selling a facility This was prompted in part by something Jonathan mentioned to me, that I guess in Dryden there was an issue where there were some promises made of things that would happen. The facility later transferred ownership, and the new owners said, "Oh, you agreed that with with nothing in writing. We don't need to do that." But also prompted by the fact that in the ORI's regulations, there is indeed a thing that says the new owner has to take on the responsibilities, et cetera. So at any rate, I have rough wording because it's really got to be worded by Guy, but I have threw that in there. So we'll look at that too. So that's one addition to what I sent you all earlier. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. And if anyone sees Catherine show up, just admit her. And let's see.
You know, that transfer of ownership was in the model law.
Yeah. Was it the model battery law or which? Because I knew I'd read it somewhere. Where did you have that, Will? Because I was looking for it.
Well, I have it documented in the spreadsheet that goes through each of the battery, the model law battery requirements, and then it's mapped onto our draft law.
Okay, great, because that explains why I remember reading something like that, and then I went looking for it in the draft law and didn't see it. And so we may hit it as we go through, and we'll flag it. But I put it at its own section, so it definitely applied to everything.
Good.
And so we'll get there. Okay, so here is the law. So everyone should be seeing. I got to make it bigger, right? Because let me see now. That was someone told me how to do that, right? Was it? Here we go. No, I don't want to change the overall font size. I want to change the size of the view. All right, someone remind me how to make it look bigger.
Bill, wait. That 100%, click on the 100%.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Yeah. Welcome.
Is that big enough or should I go yet bigger?
It's
Good
One
to
more.
One more for, that might be too much, but let's see. Does that work for everybody?
Sure.
Okay.
Good.
All right. So first item is this definition of the solar energy system. So this is in yellow is the definition that we had wound up with. And from the Tug Hill report, Barbara pulled this additional information. And what I pick out as different is that it talks about these things servicing primarily the building or buildings on the parcel on which it's located, et cetera, as you read there. I will confess right here, I'm not a big fan of this because I don't see why that its on-site consumption matters. I'm really worried about impact on stuff, but I can be convinced. I don't know everything on this. So, so let's have some discussion about whether we want to adopt any part of that definition into our solar energy system definition. And just go ahead and again talk because again, I can't see everybody to call on anyone. You sort of vanish. I can try scrolling down, but I'll miss somebody.
Bill, I think part of the issues I recall from the Tug Hill report was that this was really this definition was really referring to smaller systems essentially. So that's why it was the emphasis on on-site consumption and residential or business use,
You're
rooftop,
right. So
building integrated, and so on.
Okay, and I agree. I probably goofed and put it. I mean, it should actually be up here under small solar energy facility.
I think so. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry about that. That was just my goof. So let me just right now do that just so we can have it. Luckily it's only a few lines back. But yes, so that I'm sorry. Yes, so that the real question is, do we incorporate that into what we call a small one? We both agree on the 25 kilowatt basically, and that has to do with the unified solar permit limit. And then the question is whether there are additional requirements of it being basically, which almost always will be, which is basically for consumption on the parcel in which the panels are located.
Yeah, and I think the philosophy there, again, not to belabor this, but the philosophy there is if it's, you know, for that site and that landowner, that's fine. But even if it's a small energy facility, but you know, it's intended to sell the energy or do something else with it, then there's some level, you know, other level of approval that should go in. So it would bump it up, I guess, into a medium facility in our language or something like that. So that was the philosophy.
Right.
I see the point of that. I won't argue this, but I kind of like including these other things in the definition.
Somebody else?
I don't really see why we care where 25 kilowatts is being used because the footprint is so small.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Will, sorry.
I don't see what other use what else you would do with it unless, I don't see what other use you would do with that amount. I guess you could power more than one house. You could power your neighbor's house.
Yeah.
We refer people to the universal solar law. Does it not have its own definition of what the solar energy system is?
Yeah, well, yeah. So for one thing, it pretty much has to be a photovoltaic system. That's one thing that's required, and it has to be 25 kilowatts or less. And I don't know if it specifies consumption only on the property. It's been a while since I've looked at it. That is a good question.
May I jump in really quick? And I'm so sorry
Yes.
that I'm late. I evidently can't be. I don't want to hold this up. I think like whatever is the quickest way forward with this, but the language about on-site consumption, if you have a grid tied system, not to be super picky about it, but like technically you don't actually know where that energy is going at any one time. And in the winter, we're not making anything. So I'm unclear on why that definition even needs to be in there at all, because it's actually not correct.
Good point. I mean, I think that the way it was worded in the Lansing law to avoid that was to say that it had to be sized at 110% or less of the typical annual consumption of the property. Because yes, Catherine, you're entirely right. Those electrons go where they go. And yes, for me in the summertime, they flow out into the grid.
Correct.
And in the wintertime, they're primarily flowing back towards me.
So I would just say if we can just take that out. It's like we care about what's happening on the property with the system, but we don't actually care where the electrons are going, I don't believe, for this law.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the only thing that is relevant here really is that we're talking about roof-mounted, building integrated, or ground-mounted solar collectors. And even, that's the only thing I can imagine wanting to add in, but that's everything.
And they're both covered by the Unified Solar Permit. I mean,
Right.
So I think we'd probably be okay.
Maybe this whole paragraph doesn't have to be there as long as the 25 kilowatt is there.
That's fine. Let's take it off the table and just stick with our original.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so then down in section 5.5. All right. So what we had is this is under licensing requirements, basically that they have to be designed, installed, et cetera, by the codes, regs, et cetera, et cetera. And the suggestion coming again from the Tug Hill report is about the design has to be done by a licensed architect engineer, et cetera, from all this, these codes. So I thought, but I was wrong, that there was language to this effect in the site plan law. And I just went looking for it today. And the existing site plan law does not actually have any specifications whatsoever about the qualifications of those designing anything that the review board is going to look at. So I think it's a really valid point to bring up, this kind of stuff. So let's again have at whether we think, I can't quite get all of this on screen at one time at this font size, at least not on my screen. So what do people think? Do we want to incorporate all or some of this? I will say, oh, and I'm going to scan them through it. Blueprint, sign, plan. Okay, so this thing here on the stormwater pollution prevention plan, basically the existing site plan review law, which applies also to these, does require this plan. But there's no reason harm in being a bit redundant. That's a general issue that will be handled down the road, whether there are redundant requirements versus conflicting requirements. So I'm open to discussion.
For medium systems, I wonder if we need to make them go to a licensed engineer. I mean, you'd want somebody who was competent in the industry to be setting it up, but if they're just putting a slightly larger than 25 kilowatt system on the roof of the barn, do we need to make them spend the kind of money it takes to bring in an engineer? I think for the large systems, it makes sense.
Yeah, I'm fine with this pertaining to large systems.
I agree.
Okay, so I think that seems to be the general sense. Does anybody disagree with that?
As long as we keep the first part of the 5.5, which says all solar energy systems, have to be designed in accordance with codes, blah, blah, blah. But then large ones shall be designed, blah. Yeah.
So this will become 5.6. I'm just writing at 5.5A now, that large solar, and we'll capitalize as appropriate, and just add this additional set of things to the large ones. That I think is what I was hearing. Is a desire?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Done. Okay. Height, which has come up a few different times, but never really. So I'm stuck not really knowing a basis on which to make a firm decision. Those who were present for the waiver hearing last night know that the facility that's going to be possibly built in town, if they get the waiver and then everything else works out too, that would be maybe 13 or 14 feet tall. And Lansing in the original law we looked at had 18 feet. And then the Tug Hill report is saying 16 feet. The 20 feet that I put in came from the state level regulations, and maybe that is more appropriate to these huge 20, 30 megawatt and up facilities. But I didn't know any a priori reason why a 25 megawatt facility would be any taller than a 10 megawatt facility, because it's simply a matter of the racking, etc. But maybe it is. So, pick a number, any number, it just has to be justifiable. And that's why I use 20, because it seemed to be very justifiable based on leaning on the state. I don't know, Barb, remember anything in the Tug Hill report as to why they were saying 16, or if anybody else has thoughts on this.
I don't even know if they gave the reasoning.
Bill, did they really last night say that the system was only going to be 13 or 14 feet? I thought he said that he looked and our law said 20 and that they were under that by a couple of
A
feet.
little bit.
He said 18 because he was looking at the old version of the law. And I thought he said we'd only be at about 13 or so, but maybe I misheard that. And Will's agreeing that I misheard it. So I guess I misheard it. So that puts them at maybe 16.
But I think the 20-foot, the purpose of that is to give more flexibility in siting, because as you recall, ORS is really focused on brownfield and industrial sites, and more heavily, well, I can't say more heavily populated, but areas that are more likely to be closer to developed sites already. So the 20-foot height limitation, as opposed to what Tug Hill had would give you more flexibility in your sighting.
Say that last sentence again.
The higher height gives you more flexibility in your sighting.
Right, so that's the state level, whereas the Tug Hill one is shorter, 16 feet. I mean, you know, from a visual impact, I can see that maybe shorter is better, but as Will's saying, from a flexibility standpoint, taller is better. So, you know.
So is this C specifically about small scale systems?
Actually, this is supposed to be medium scale, and that we have a similar language in the large scale.
Because
It should actually just say medium. That's left over from a long time ago. That was a old wording. So just say medium. But anyway.
because I think the larger systems, I like letting them have the 20-foot option. Most of the system is going to be so far away from an immediate, viewer point that a couple of feet there hardly matters. I could see in somebody's backyard having something right next to somebody else's fence, and you don't want it to stick up beyond a reasonable level. But
Yeah, I think that the other thing is that because Caroline has so much more topography than Lansing, I think everything, it's very much more likely that one would have something where the thing has to be on there's a downhill slope, and the collector might be going upward. I think 18 or 20 would be fine.
Okay, so we have to pick a number. So
Right.
Why, the 20 feet coming from Ori's, at least that's explainable, what the basis is for that. And I also actually, wonder, like with the SunX project, they're talking about having, the movable, the tracking solar panels that, as technology develops, it could be that, the additional height could be useful, to accommodate something like that. So I'm fine with that. I think consistency with the ORIS is fine.
Yeah,
I agree with what Barbara
Good.
just said about the
Okay.
flexible, the tracking ones.
Yeah.
I don't know whether the ones that they're planning to do are just going east to west, or if they're also doing vertical, but on our
Right,
pole
right.
mounted, we put them really almost vertical in the winter time and still get some energy on sunny days, but that could make them taller.
Yeah, from the mechanism he described, I think it's probably a fixed vertical tilt and just rotates east to west, because I don't see how with the worm gear he was talking about, you get both, but maybe they're very clever. There's clever engineers out there, but sure. So let's, I guess, the general sentiment here is leave it at 20. So,
Yep.
Sounds good.
all right. And then that will be, that's already the case in the large one. So, okay. So then lighting. So here's the language that I sent out modified this afternoon, or last, I guess it was this morning. So the main change is to not use the word standards, because indeed there aren't explicit standards that one could find by going to that website. But they do have their principles. So in particular, I refer now, and recently they adopted in conjunction with the Engineering Society, the Illuminating Engineering Society of North America, to get my words out, they officially adopted, 5 principles having to do with trying to keep, down glare and stray light and, dark skies and everything. So they have an official 5 principles document. So this now refers to conforming to those principles. So that's, again, not a hard cutoff, but gives a target to shoot at. It also now adds in the language about using fixtures that are either approved by the Dark Sky Association or at least are, similar. And finally, the big thing that their lighting classification in their model ordinance is based on is a rating of luminaires in terms of backlight, uplight, and glare. And so I threw in the reference to that ANSI standard. And then finally added the specific point that the overall level of light we're thinking about for Caroline is the 2 lowest categories in the model lighting ordinance. So we're not appealing directly to any single thing, but giving the guidance to the review board of these are the sort of principles and levels that you should hold the applicant to. And then the last part is what we had before, which is sort of, you know, where if it's when it's motion activated, it's got to be when people approach close to the stuff. So is that too specific? Not specific enough? Fine. What do people think?
I liked it.
All right, if I'm not hearing any disagreement, that means that is going to replace this.
I just have one question.
Yes.
I know there was discussion about this for the site plan review law, and I'm just wondering how this compares to what's in that, because there was some updating in that as well.
Yeah, so I think honestly that when site plan is looked at soon, which I think will be happening soon by the review board and others, they should take this language and put it in there. The site plan law, next language I put sort of came from there, appealed to the standards of that organization. The existing site plan law, and Michelle, you probably recall this, it refers to stuff that is outdated and outmoded. And so that was, you know, it's a principles that people don't use anymore. And so, but the new one kept a little bit of that, but didn't give any other hard standards and just said to these guys standards. I think this is probably a better wording of the requirements, unless again, we want to get an engineer involved to like say, yeah, this is the level, exact kind of backlighting, exact kind of, you know, so that's my suggestion, that,
Okay,
that the site plan be updated to match this.
Yeah.
And that will get propagated down to the large setting as well. Okay, so the next step is in the large solar setting. Why is that? Okay, sorry, I'm looking for pink. There we go. All right, so these setbacks again are taken from the state regulations. The Tug Hill report just had a 200 feet from lot lines adjacent. So that's further. It's less far than, no, it's further than the lot line of a non-participating property, and a lot further than for the participant. You know, this is something is wrong here. Oh, I see, non-residential, residential. I mean, getting myself confused. Sorry about that. So yeah, so that number is, you know, in terms of the lot lines, it's somewhat or a lot bigger than this. Again, bigger setback might be nice. On the other hand, it might make it harder for them to avoid cutting down vegetation that we want maintained. Where do we go with the setback? Will, I think you're breaking up. You better try that again from the beginning.
Oh, okay. How is it now?
That's fine.
Okay. So I looked at a presentation from 2020 by the guy who's we came out of the Rochester office of Ag and Market, and it was a critique of the ORS regulations. And in the analysis, I copied the presentation into the resources, but I did it this afternoon, so I didn't let anyone know. But he made the point that when you have the setups where it's adjacent parcels and you have these setbacks, you're losing, he felt that you were losing more farmland than you needed to, the use of farmland more than you needed to, and that if you have like what's proposed on 76 Road, if you have a setup like that, there's no reason to have those big setbacks on the where the two properties meet.
Right.
Even though
but these don't apply because this is only for non-participating properties and residences. So again, the law is silent on setbacks for participating parcels. I think the state regulations explicitly say 0, or somewhere it said 0 for a participating one. We could add that. It could explicitly say you don't need a setback if it's a participating parcel.
Right,
But I think-
and the Tug Hill report says that. It says solar structures that are adjacent to other parcels with a similar scale solar systems will have a 0-foot setback.
Yeah.
And so the
Yeah,
point.
I don't,
the-
yeah,
the-
I just didn't see it here.
No, but the
Sorry.
point here is that if you're, if you're a single or multifamily residence next to it, you want to have a setback. And so ours currently is the 250 feet, which is even more than what the Tug Hill report was saying.
Yeah, that was, it
Okay,
is
so-
from, yes, yeah, 250 feet from the residence, that's true. And this is lot lines.
From lot lines.
So there's two, yeah, there's one number from lot lines if located, yeah. So it is actually bigger than our ones for lot lines here.
Ah,
But-
right. Yeah, I guess I would err on the 200 feet from lot lines for a residence, singular multifamily residence. Actually, I like the Tug Hill approach.
Okay.
Did they
so-
have a specific reason for 200 feet or? That's long distance.
Again, it was because if you're a residence, that you don't want your lot to be encumbered by a huge solar facility next door to you. You want to have some buffer.
Mhm.
So that kind of
One of
language is what
the-
you were saying.
One
ahead,
of
yeah, I'm
the
listening.
things that's kind of quirky kind of thing going on with what NYSERDA is doing is that NYSERDA and NYSEG are going to treat projects on adjacent parcels as individual projects. They're not going to treat it as a single project, even when they go through the study queue and all that. And when they get put in their, when they want to get their blocks of megawatts and their pricing and all that, they're going to treat them as 5 separate projects, not one big one. And so that's where I'm getting a little confused about the participating property and non-participating. I think we know what we mean. I guess I would just ask that when you read it one more time that you make sure it can't be read the wrong way.
Okay, I think I get you. So Barb, your suggestion was to increase this, to insert the language talking about a single multifamily residence and increase that to 200 feet. Is
Yes,
that- Am I correct? Okay.
yes.
So are people agreeable to upping that to 200 feet? We still keep it relatively low because if there's nobody living there, again, it does seem like maybe there'd be reason to allow them, to come close to the border. But if someone's living nearby, we give a pretty big buffer. Do I hear any objections to raising that to 200 feet? All right.
So Bill, just, to the point that you could have 2 different solar projects, like 2 different companies doing solar projects, but on adjacent properties, it's not really a participating property line. And so I put in the chat, some language that says that might be useful to work in here.
All right, so, I hate when
Yeah.
people do hard things like that on me. All right, so, Okay, I see what you, yeah, I'm gonna just take this and I'm going to take that language and insert it down here
And then you can later convert it to the same style.
yes, that's why. At least it's pink. That'll grab my attention. So
Thank you.
great. Okay. So then under screen plantings, right. So we'll migrate the lighting stuff down. Okay. So, we had a fairly abbreviated description of the screen planting. I forgot to say which report, this might've been Tug Hill again, so it had a much more specific discussion of what that should be. How do people feel about that?
I'm fine with not including this level of detail. I've been looking at the other solar facilities like in Dryden and stuff, and I don't know. I'd kind of be hard pressed to measure out all of this stuff and figure out which is which. So I'm fine with not including it. They do. I'm just looking at the Tug Hill now. They also have language that that the system shall have the least visual effect practical as determined by the planning board.
We have language like that, I believe.
Later on, okay.
Yeah, somewhere we had it in, version history, right? We had it at one point, and I'm not going to waste people a lot of time.
Yeah, that's fine. I believe you.
Yeah, there it is. Must have the least visual effect reasonably practicable. So yeah, we do have that stuff.
Great. Okay.
Just want to make sure my memory, I'm not old enough to get a shot yet, but I'm still getting up there. So, all right. Does anyone want to take anything from this pink section and include it? All right, so it's going to go. And lastly, for this section was a statement about lot coverage. And I know I've mouthed off on this before. Again, I don't particularly see a reason for this, but I want us to deal with it because again, I'm willing to be beaten into submission. Anybody want?
I don't think you can tell what it means, to tell you the truth.
I mean, the existing case, again, we only have one case that I know anything about because they talked about it last night, and they're going to subdivide. So once they're done subdividing, they're going to cover 100% of the parcel, but that's because they chopped it off from something.
Which they have to do in order to get it approval.
Right. So this would have to at least say on the parcel prior to subdivision or something. But I don't see a good rationale for why we want to not exceed 50% of a parcel size. If there were a farmer who wanted to, cover his entire field for 30 years with solar panels and improve it with sheep and then go back to farming 30 years, that's totally fine with me. I don't have a big problem with it. This often is more considered in more urban areas, perhaps. But anyway, I just don't have a problem with lot coverage. But maybe I'm naive, don't know something. So I'm tossing it out there.
I'm fine not including it.
Any objection to removing it? Great. All right. Down to, all right. So that would get us to a battery. We're going to come back to battery stuff, like I said. So we're going to skip down to section 12. Sorry for the dizziness as I do that. Okay. So this is the abandonment and decommissioning section. So changes here. A suggestion. So again, this is one of the few remaining fragments from the Lansing law, the definition that if there were a lack of production for 6 months or for any 12 of 18 months, that was basically tantamount to decommissioning, and that would have to be decommissioned. I always wondered about that. So Will has suggested this alternative, which I kind of like, which says that basically, you know, if they approach the review board and say, look, we're going to be out of business for the next year or so while we do X, but we're going to maintain things and we promise to come back online, you know, at some point. So as long as they have a maintenance plan and agreement with the review board, then they can even do this. But if they don't have that, then indeed, this is a trigger for decommissioning. How do people feel about this change?
So what's the reasoning for 6 months, lack of production for 6 months?
You know, one of the things I don't know the answer to, it was again, their language, and in general, we haven't just kept their language. I never got a rationale for why that was the number chosen. Do not know.
Yeah, I'm looking at Tug Hill, again, just as another example, and they say if they have been abandoned or not produced electricity for a period of 1 year.
Yeah, could be. I don't have a problem with that either. Will, anybody else? Thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's good. The 12 out of 18, I think having it be 1 year, period. 12 out of 18 months, if they want to go have 6 months and then they're out down for a while, they're back up again for 6 months. I don't know. That seems like it's
Sorry. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think being flexible, I would rather be flexible on it. So whatever's more flexible is something I'm more likely to.
And so this is one possible change. Simply say 1 year. Again, it still allows them to have a maintenance plan approved by the review board so that they can not be decommissioned if they have to be out for a couple of years for some extraordinary reason. And, you know, maybe it's too soft on them because most places really ought to be in business some portion of a year. But I'm also okay. Giving me a year is a nice round number, you know, that's a great rationale, I know. But so I would be also fine with this wording.
Yeah, I'm fine with 1 year.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm fine with 1 year. I'm just curious, would they actually would they actually give notice that they're not going to be in production for a certain amount of time? Is that required?
Well, this says that they're going to need to, I guess.
Okay.
Let's see.
It says the lack of a current permit violation of permit conditions.
Right. So, I mean, I'm thinking, I mean, we have a requirement that if they have like a fire or big problem, they have to inform the town.
Right.
There's probably no explicit mechanism by where the town would learn that they are out of commission because we haven't asked for it. Would they? Maybe. Okay. So that would be back up top somewhere. And I'm just going to put a note. Does that seem like a reasonable thing to add, that they should inform the town if they're going to stop production for some length of time, and what should that length of time be?
maybe that's where 6 months makes sense. You know, that if they are going to be out of commission for a year, you sort of want to get some clues before the year's up.
So something like 6 months or more, if you know, if there's a planned outage for that time, or if there's an accident and they can't repair it for some time. And that sound okay? It's going to be, again, there's somewhere I know we talked about, it's like under the operation requirements, you know, 8 point whatever, 6 or 7, you know, one of those, it would probably go there. Right where we say if there's an accident or something, inform the town. All right. We'll flag this wording of partial order at one point, and again, you know, always embarrassed. You know, whenever someone asks me something I don't know, it always turns out to be language from Lansing that we didn't change, and that's exactly the case here. This was language they had that I just sort of let slide by. I have no idea what a partial order is. My guess is it's some legally defined term that Guy can tell us what it means, but I don't really know. And I don't know, you know, he is currently looking at this law. At least I gave him a copy this week. Beyond that, I can't tell you anything about it, Will, or anybody else.
Don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So then on one of the requirements, okay, so, you know, they have to remove stuff. That's what decommissioning means. You're going to take your solar panels away, et cetera. We already had a provision in that the review board could let them leave in some landscaping or other stuff that's well below grade, because sometimes it's just more destructive to pull it out again than to leave it. This came up in part because of battery, and so maybe this will just get left because we're not dealing with battery stuff that much today. But Will made the very good point that, you know, if you've got a building that you built to house a bunch of batteries, does it necessarily make sense that decommissioning means tearing down the building, or should that be repurposed better as a better thing? So the change was to not just below grade foundations, but they could have enclosures, concrete pads, you know, like again, the foundation of what your building was. I'm open. I mean, it could be, you know, there will be pads, at least gravel pads, if not concrete pads, in which they are putting their transformers and other control equipment, even if it's not a battery facility. So again, I'm open to thoughts between the green and the orange here.
So I'm thinking of abandoned strip malls and things, you know, if the building can be repurposed, and more importantly, if it's going to be repurposed, we wouldn't want to make them tear it down. But if we just say they never have to tear down a building, then you may be left with these, you know, like a barn that's slowly disintegrating over 50 years. So I would imagine that could be left up to the planning board, you know, that would be part of the decommissioning plan, is to identify what will happen with any structures and allow some back and forth on that.
Yeah, I'm fine with the language that the review board may allow. It's not saying that they are allowed. So the review board may also prohibit that. So to me, the flexibility is appropriate.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, and agreed. I mean, I think were I on the review board, yeah, what I would want to know from the applicant or the operator is, oh, so have you identified some possible owners? And if they don't take it over in a year, we're holding back this money that you gave us in escrow so we can demolish the building if you don't really find, you know, I mean, so there's flexibility there. So I think that's reasonable. So that, and it will just become this eventually. Okay, other change here, again, so this is by Will, was to add reusable. We had recycling chat. So now, of course, it's not just reusing, it's not just recycling, but reusing. So I think, you know, anyone have an objection to adding the word reuse in this paragraph section?
Great addition.
Yeah. Okay, she will also flagged again, this is one of the things I also my eyebrows rose at it a little bit in the Lansing law, but it was the a beneficial use declaration. So my understanding of a beneficial use declaration is that an agency, typically the DEC, can say, oh, this thing that might normally be like bad, at least hazardous, or we want to put it in a landfill, there is this beneficial use for it. So you can dispose of it by using it in this beneficial way. And it always gets down to whether you really trust or believe the agency in that regard. And as I related to Will in an email, we had a huge fight over this during the fracking time, because it was the thought, at least the flow back, or at least the produced water from a hydrofrac well could be used to de-ice roads, despite, you know, what level of contaminants are in there, et cetera. You know, so it becomes a debate. And if it really is safe, that makes sense. But we all know there's a lot of lobbying going on in determining what's safe. So I think that Lansing threw this in because they didn't want to be caught by a possible beneficial use declaration by the state that they didn't agree with. So I think that's why this language is here. And I would recommend keeping it, but I'm, again, open to hearing thoughts.
So is that like saying that you would end up with something from, like, say, the posts, where we didn't really want them to leave the posts in the ground, but the state could find some reason to leave the posts in the ground?
Good question. I
I
don't know
have
how.
much imagination here.
Yeah, I don't know. It might more be, yeah, whether, good question. Like, and I don't know in this case, like, oh, all that solar panels that you're pulling up and have to send up to the landfill, and instead we're going to crush them and use them for substrate on our road. I mean, possibly. I mean, I don't, you know, I'm also grabbing at stuff. I have no idea. All this does is avoid the fact that there could be such a declaration. If there never is one, doesn't matter, right? This only says you can't use a beneficial use declaration to vary from the fact that we want you to actually clean up and remediate and dispose.
But if the state says that you can do something like that, then does our saying no, you can't stand up?
It may or may not. So, you know, again, the New York is a home rule state. So in many cases, yes, local laws can do that, but not all the time. And I can't tell you, you know, that's a Guy question, right? A Guy Crow question. So good point. And it is, yes, but this could be in the law. And then 10 years from now, when they try to implement it, the state could slap down and say, no, you know, we void that provision of your local law. Yes, that is definitely a possibility. But I think no harm in keeping it. But yeah, Jonathan, you can say something?
Just, could they have to go back if they want to get something declared for beneficial use? Could they just go back to the planning board possibly, and the planning board would have to okay it? So they couldn't do this unless it was pre-approved by the planning board?
Yeah. And you know, again, in our town, that's the review board, just so you know, because we the planning board don't have to do that.
Okay.
Interesting
Sorry.
question. You know, no, quite all right. I mean, the issue potentially there is how more easily influenceable is the review board, say, than this law. You know, and they do have the ability to hire outside experts because they normally would not necessarily have the expertise to evaluate that question, right? The review board is just, you know, a handful of folks picked from the town, but they could employ an expert to make that determination. Though I don't think the site plan law gives them authority to do that for something like this. It's only during the application phase.
So there would be an assumption here that the beneficial use would have some monetary value for the developer, like as part of their
yes,
salvage.
Often by avoiding disposal costs. Possibly by even adding money because the beneficial use might include selling it to someone. But I think more you at least avoid the disposal costs that are normally associated with the item. And again, I'm definitely treading beyond my comfort zone. This is just, I'm grasping at little wisps of knowledge I have. But to Jonathan's point, I think one could put an escape clause in saying unless approved by the review board. I would tend not to in this case, just because this tends to be pretty technically oriented, and I would just worry then at the ability to make a good determination. But
what if the language was unless approved by the review board during the initial site plan?
That could be.
I mean, they might be able to come up with a plan that actually makes sense to us.
Anybody, other seconds for that kind of idea?
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
And, you know, well, I think that's, you know, the weakness in that is that, of course, these are being decommissioned maybe 30 years after they were built, and the landscape can change a lot in that time. There might be a beneficial use not currently known that is developed in those intervening 30 years, and this cuts that out. So the other option would be to add language saying, somehow add ability to hire expert opinion, but, which would mean we wouldn't have to say at the time of application. Do people like that option better?
You mean,
I could
so they'd essentially be submitting a revised decommissioning plan?
Yes. Or we're going to just leave it as the orange is, which is pretty simple and straightforward.
I like the orange.
All right. And, we may hear about this whenever there is eventually a public hearing on the law. Okay. All right. So I think, so then from one of these reports, this one is the American Environmental Trust report, was some language about topsoil. So in terms of remediation, that you have to return to its original condition prior to construction, including adequate layer of topsoil, and then decompact, regrade, repair drainage structures, etc. I'm certainly fine putting something like this in there. Anyone, what do people want to say?
I like this language because to me it's consistent with kind of the overall goals of the comprehensive plan. One reason we encourage solar and renewable energy development is in conjunction. It preserves or gives the landowners the ability to keep agricultural land in perpetuity, and this ties into that goal.
It's also consistent with the construction requirements, I think, or at least what we had before, where you have to restore whatever is disturbed during construction, right?
Right. I'm scrolling back and forth. I know, again, probably making you guys dizzy. So it looks to me, if we were to add this, it could be added in under this first 12.2a. Sorry, no, I was looking wrong. Sorry. This, there's a B and a B. Okay, well, this is going to become C, but it would be in here where we're talking about removing them and access roads and be able to leave stuff. Would that be what we could insert as most of this language on topsoil, or we could add a whole new item that is the topsoil? But this is talking about removing the infrastructure, remediate soil. So that's why I thought it might go there.
Can you scroll back up? What's 12.2 titled, or what is the theme? Decommissioning, site restoration. Yeah, I guess, that could be, to me, it would be a separate letter within 12.2. Okay. Like maybe it goes after E. Yeah. Or it could go up farther where you said.
Yeah,
fine.
No, I think that's fine too. And the removal infrastructure is kind of handled up here, which is why I was thinking of that. So that's fine. So I think that we would probably take that part out. It'd just be remediate soil.
Yep.
Okay. And yeah, so this was screwed up here. So this really is C. This really is D. E. F. And then this will become G.
Yeah.
And this will be H. Sound good?
Yep.
All right. All right. Just again, a few words that got added from what was there before, I believe non-controversial, because it just said it had to be removed, but then, someone's got to decide that it's good enough. And that person in our town is deputy code officer. Okay, so here's the thing I added that it says to be fixed by town lawyer. And to be honest, I don't know. I mean, there's language in the state regulations that says if there's a transfer of a permit, and this is where I don't really fully understand all the legal language. I mean, a permit is something you have to do something, and when you finish the facility and are operating it, you may still be considered to be holding a permit from the town, but I'm not sure about that. So I wrote it for both if you're trying to give the permit to somebody else and if you're trying to sell your facility. And it may be that that's redundant, or even overly redundant. But I can count on and like Will, like you said, there was language in stuff you had. I just couldn't find it in time for this. And that may be smarter language. But I really basically want Guy to write something that says, whoever takes this over has to do what the first person agreed to.
Yeah. Well, like with the tower on Bald Hill, that's already changed ownership. And they were required to report that to the FCC, which they did, but I don't know that they were required to report it to the town.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah. So I'm gonna, and I think I'm just basically gonna ask Guy to write a section for us, but I mean, with these sort of that basic idea. Okay, so again, and this is also in part spurred by something Jonathan sent me, which is commentary. Jonathan, you can tell me that what in the Dryden place, what did you hear?
Yeah, just in a conversation with David Weinstein, he said that 2 of their 3 farms had actually changed hands after the permits were, and that they did have some issues where the new owner said, well, nothing's in writing, so we don't have to be held by that. And I guess that's still the case. I mean, it has to be in writing for us to hold them to it, but
yes,
I think it's good to have a clause that.
So all the obligations for the maintaining the escrow for decommissioning, that all goes with the permitting. But I can't remember if we spelled that out, but it should be clear in this document that the cost of decommissioning and that whole, I'm sorry, I'm not being very clear, but all the obligations of the permit transfer as well as the permissions.
right. And you're right. I mean, I think that it probably is. It's sort of like it's like successor owners or something, but because it has the form of surety, etc. And I'm trying to figure out. You're right. It says future owner operated facility. So I think that's going to. Yes, I think that's the idea. That I mean, and I think it'll be again if they sell it, it'll be between the 2 parties. That the one selling it's going to want to get their escrow money back by essentially getting it from the person who's buying it. But I agree with you. So I think future owner, I hope covers, future or successor owner.
Well, I think your permissions and obligations transfer is, I guess Guy will let you know what the language is, but I think that it's the obligations that need to be included with the permissions.
Right.
Oh, you have that in 13.2.
Yeah,
right?
that's if it's sold, terms, obligations, terms, limitations, conditions, right. So yeah, this is just the idea, and I'll let them look at this and fix it up legalese wise.
Great.
Okay, great. All right, and so that's that. All right, so that means we're gonna back up and do some battery stuff now for a while, and I'll try to adjourn right around 7 o'clock. But basically, okay. So, but before you now, is Val here again? Do we have everybody present?
I don't think Val is here yet.
I don't think he's here.
Yeah, he said he had to go away for a little while.
No.
Okay. though we have, let's see, even with that, we still have quorum.
So,
What basically I want to ask now. So Catherine, before you joined,
Yeah.
we did decide to try to get done with the solar law tonight, which I think we've now done, which is actually
you did.
essentially
Yeah, you guys have done amazing work.
and that Val and Michelle and Barbara would serve on the zoning commission, and that Will and I would continue working on the battery stuff. And now we'll make the decision if we're going to just pull it out into its own law. And so the solar part would be ready to deliver to the town board after tonight.
Great.
And that the decision will be made down the road a month or two from now, whether Will and I then joined the zoning effort or got another person and continued on other efforts. But that
Have
was
you
sort of
spoken to Mark since last night?
Nope.
by any chance? Okay, so I would imagine that will happen, and we may want all of you.
Yeah.
But you can talk to Mark about that.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that would, I mostly want to make sure that the solar and battery stuff don't somehow die or languish, and so the solar's
No,
done.
sounds like they're not. Yeah.
As long as Will and I can have time to finish the other, then it'll work out.
Mhm.
So
That's a good plan.
so what I'm going to do, we very rarely actually take votes in the planning board, but this is a big enough decision, and on record, the two votes I'm going to ask for, and let's discuss the question of, again, we are, first up, do we feel like we're done with the solar stuff? Is there any other outstanding questions related to the actual solar part of this law that people think we have not addressed, that I've somehow let slip through the cracks?
Just a point of clarification that when you talked to the code officer, he didn't think that the permit applied to non-grid installations, and there's nothing actually on the permit. It's sort of implied, but there's no reason why it couldn't be adapted to that.
Yes, good point. He said he had to dig on that one. And I don't know if that means if he went to the state and said, hey, what was your intent here? But that was the one answer it was hard for him to come up with. And that was his final determination. It was that the unified solar permit only applies to grid tied systems. He also potentially could be wrong. But I agree with you that one could take something like that document and create a town one that was, applicable to non-grid tied systems. It's just that the state one is, I guess, not necessarily that.
And also just some context, the likelihood of a non-grid tied system being very large is pretty small.
Yeah, but there could be, the unified solar permit is 25 kilowatts or less, so it could apply to a 5 kilowatt system, and that is in the range of what you might do for, but yes. Okay, so with that, I basically am going to ask for discussion. Are people fine with or hate the idea of yanking all the battery material out and placing it in its own law? And I'm going to stop screen sharing. We'll start it up again if we have time. That way I can see everybody. So, again, nominally we work by Robert's rules or some sort of parliamentary procedure, but we don't do motions in seconds because it's just, arduous. But if we want to, we can, someone move that we place the battery section in its own law and second it and discuss it. If we want to do this according to Hoyle, or actually Roger.
Okay, so I have a question. I actually have no clue about this. If an electric utility wants to make some changes at a substation, do they tell the town? Is there any
doubt it.
interaction? Okay, because
Good question, but I don't know the answer, but I would doubt it. There would be no reason that I could see why that would happen.
okay.
I'll move that we break the existing draft into two separate laws, one dealing with solar facilities and one dealing with battery facilities.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, great. All right. Is there any discussion on this question, or shall we proceed to a vote? Okay. I guess all in favor, just raise your hand because I can see everybody right now. So, all right. So that's what we're going to do. Great. Doesn't matter what Val says. All right. Good. All right.
I'll take Val's eye. How's that?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Having done that, I don't want to keep people too late. I do think that we could at least look at section 9.2 together because I love having all of your brains on this. And then before we really, and then I'll just ask one question about scale. So let's try that for the remaining part of our meeting. So I'm going to share screen again and go back to there. Okay. So in section 9, okay, and Will, maybe you want to speak this because so specifically for in the solar section, there was language about defining routine, minor or general maintenance and repair. And again, this is language that came from Lansing, so it's very legalistic, and probably Guy wrote it. That's why it sort of has these sort of like, very arduous wordings. But for batteries in particular, Will, you suggested changing this because I guess, again, panels occupy a lot of land, and your what defines maintenance or repair, and you thought that the better language for the battery stuff was to say that it excluded routine maintenance, minor repair, improvements for efficiency, or a change in battery housing. Anything you want to say about that, and any general discussion on that point? So Will, you first.
Okay. Well, some of this depends on the direction we're going in, because I hear you saying, well, it's like a building with safety considerations, but the problem I was having with that is when I looked at the site plan review law, and I have to admit I did not look at the one that came out of the task force. I could not read the definitions for all the types of use and decide what kind of use that would be, because it didn't really properly fit the definitions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just my opinion. So yeah, I think that's really it's hard to look at everything else without having made that decision.
Okay, good, because that was indeed the next question I was going to get to. What I will say on that is, so, right, if there weren't a battery law, which we are going to have, so that's going to help, or there weren't a specific trigger placed into the site plan law about a battery facility, which could happen, it would only trigger a site plan review review if it disturbed an acre or more. That's the one I think it would be most likely to trigger. And indeed, if it's simply a building, a two-story building even, that they house compactly on 3/4 of an acre, there would be no town review under current law. And what I was trying to say more was, is there a reason, and what is the justification for the town to require different kinds of review for battery energy storage facilities than for any other building in town? And safety is one of them, though there are safety concerns with various things. And maybe there ought to be something more, there should be a general clause about explosive hazards in the site plan review law. There's probably something, but I don't know if it's good enough. But I think there's a lot extra one could either add to site plan or put in a standalone law to cover battery facilities. So I'm not trying to argue we shouldn't have something specific to batteries. I was arguing in part thinking about, well, the site plan review law has a lot to say about how do buildings look, which we weren't putting in here. And if this is a bunch of containers scattered in the field, that's one thing. But if it is a 2-story building, maybe the sort of thoughts about what things should look like in Caroline should be relevant. And I think that they can be by simply saying the site plan has to apply to. But the last thing, and this, the last point of discussion for the group right now is, as this law was written, the requirements are essentially all the same requirements as for a large solar facility. And in particular, the difference between a medium and a large has a lot to do with wildlife impacts. There's a lot more is expected in terms of surveys of animals, communities, plant communities, the fact that there's a screen planting, and it wasn't clear to me that those ought to apply to something that might only take up an acre or two. So what I do think I would like to have here, because this will give guidance to Will and I, is do you folks think in general that we should look at it more like a medium scale facility or more like a large scale facility in terms of the requirements placed on the review?
So I would think that in terms of the likely space or acreage that it's probable to occupy, that using the medium approach would be appropriate. But given, I don't know, the level of safety or danger, that there might be something in the large scale one that it would be useful to take a look at. So I guess, rather than saying it should all be medium, I'd encourage just a careful look, given, to see if there's anything in the large that should pertain basically for safety reasons.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Anybody else? I think that's a great idea. Anybody else? Okay. I think, rather than in, 5 minutes diving into this whole long section, I think that we'll call it there. That's a good sense of direction for me. And I will, Catherine, you're still on the call? Let me just stop sharing.
I'm here. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
great. So actually I meant to stop. Why didn't it? Oh, there we go.
Where
Can
would
you-
I go, Bill? Come on.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you guys such a, you're just part of the planning board. You can't.
I can't stay away. What's
yeah.
up?
Do you want to report to Mark our decision that it's that indeed, Val and Barb and Michelle are willing, and
Yep.
well, certainly able and probably willing to start
Yep.
immediately on the zoning commission, and that if he entices us enough, Will and I will join in the future. But seriously, if you can just talk to him that that's the decision we
Yeah.
made.
Val,
Will and I
Barb,
will-
Michelle. Yep.
And that Will and I will keep working on the battery part of the law, or battery law now, a separate law, and that I will make these final changes and send a copy to the town board.
Yep. Email sent right now.
Great.
And Bill, just to be clear, that the expectation then is once the zoning commission work concludes, that we become the planning board again, right?
Absolutely. You
Okay.
can't get away from me that easily. Yeah, no, I will be very much looking, again, I'm very much looking forward to working on other aspects of town business, but I agree the zoning plan in place is a key thing. But yeah, I want you all back when that's all done.
When would our next meeting be?
All right, so basically the planning board is going to, basically Will and I will meet. Again, we won't have quorum, so what we could do, so in general, the next meeting most of you have to worry about is when the zoning commission starts meeting. Yeah, you are hereby relieved of almost all planning board duties, save this one, which is that when Will and I have a draft battery siting law ready, we're going to reconvene. I'll send you a draft, give you a week or whatever to read it, and then we'll reconvene, even if for 15 minutes or an hour, whatever it takes, to go over that law, approve it, so that can then go to the town board as well. But outside of that, I'm expecting that it's there's only so much time you got in your lives. It's zoning commission work. So there'll be one meeting sometime in the future, and then the next planning board meeting will be whenever the zoning commission finishes its work. If I were to guess, that's about 9-ish months from now, but that's a total wild guess.
2 years. No, I mean, so somebody will contact us and tell us when
Oh, yeah.
with the zoning commission.
So, should I fill you in on interview? So we interviewed people last night.
Okay, okay, great.
The lay people, non-planning board people. And we've identified the candidates from that slate who will be joining you all. And since that has not been announced publicly yet, I'm not going to share who those people are right now, but you will have buddies with you. And we have identified some people, whether, like what the full body looks like as time goes on will kind of remain to be seen. But I'm excited that I think, between you all and the people that we have onboarded from the interviews last night, we're going to have a pretty robust group. And yeah, I think it's a great thing.
So you may not know this, therefore, but do you have any sense of when the first meeting of the zoning commission would be?
No.
Okay. And do you, where's the status of finding a planner to advise the zoning commission?
That is pretty much, I won't say done, but it is like very much in progress is
Great.
my impression. So yeah, so there will be a planner. We have identified a chair of the zoning commission.
Oh,
Okay.
can we know
as
that
well.
or no?
What?
Can we know that or?
I think I'll wait on that because that would disclose, some of the results of last night, I guess. I don't know. It's not a big deal. I'm not trying to make it mysterious, but I realize that we haven't had I want to confirm that the candidates who interviewed have been notified before I tell you all who those people are.
Blab it all out and yeah.
But I would say certainly as soon as possible, we have made our determination. Those people will be notified. We all know who you are. And I would hope that we would be getting together, very shortly, like certainly within we are not waiting until the April board meetings and all of that. And Tim will be the liaison to the zoning commission.
Okay, great. Any other news or updates from anyone? All right. So thank you all. Yeah, good work and good lift on the solar law. Feels good to have that ready at any rate. Jonathan, thank you all also for your help as a non-planning board member, and you are welcome to continue.
Do you want to be one? We have an opening.
It sounds like a lot of work. Well,
I've already asked him in the past, and he agreed to sleep on it indefinitely.
I've been enjoying being the sort of honorary mascot planning board
Yes.
member.
It involves significant fame and glory, as you can tell. So I would
Ooh.
reconsider. Just saying.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll think about that.
Okay. Well, tentatively, we're gonna, keep to a month from now schedule because I just need a bit of a break. But I
Okay.
want to make sure we get the stuff done. And so, obviously anyone is still invited to come to that meeting. So Jonathan, if you want to, that would be great.
I
And we can certainly do some work via email in the interim. You and I have a good
yeah,
email connection, so.
I could take a shot at a revision based on just what we've said tonight. And
That'd be
then
awesome.
we can figure out where the provisions belong once we know what we want. So but you're talking about April 8th, the second Thursday is?
Yeah. So our regular meetings are the second
Likely.
Thursday of the month. Yep.
Okay,
Yep. That's when it should be.
okay.
All right.
So Bill,
Right.
will you be sending this document to us? Are
Yes.
we awaiting the
Yes.
receipt
No,
of it?
I need to, tweak, take colors out and
Sure,
tweak
sure.
final wording, and then I'm going to send it to you. Yes.
Thank you guys so much.
It'll probably be, a few days or a week. So
Amazing. Huge,
Yes.
huge. It's great.
great.
Do
Okay.
you want to, who's going to proofread it?
Were you volunteering to proofread, Will, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can. proofread.
Let me do my work on it, and then I'll send you the Word copy to do proofing on. That'd be great.
Yeah, give me enough time so I have 2 days to turn it around.
No worries. I mean, I know the town board's gonna be breathing down my neck, but we'll get it off really soon.
Okay,
All right. Good night. And Leo, thank you for joining
Thank
us.
you.
Hope you enjoyed it. And good night, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Good night.
Have a good weekend.
All right. Thanks.